So, Dineo, thank you so much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership.
Thank you.
But before we go into leadership, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Where did you grow up?
So thank you. I grew up in Soweto, in a township called Diepkloof in Soweto. I grew up, I'm the second of three daughters of my mom. I was raised predominantly by my granny, I think like most of people of my age.
Right.
And my mom was a seamstress in a clothing factory. So my sisters and I are quite close, although our ages, we have quite a big age gap between all three of us, but we are very close as a family.
And what was your dream career as you grew up?
Well, I figured out when I started high school that I'm good with maths and accounting. So later on in high school, I discovered that there's a career called Chartered Accounting. And I discovered, well, that's the highest level you can go in accounting. So I thought, oh, I'll go for that one. So it's not as though I had a dream career. It's just what I was good at. And I wanted to be at the very top of the chain. So that's why I went for that.
And where did you start your career?
I was quite lucky or blessed to receive a bursary from Grant Thornton. At that time, they were called Kessel Feinstein. They've now merged with Susan Saluba. So they gave me a bursary, and I was then able to start my articles with them. So that really was the start of everything for me when I did my articles with Grant Thornton. I spent about 4.5 years with them. I was studying and doing articles. So it was obviously it's not easy because I've never been in a full-time university. I've always studied part-time.
And how did you move from accounting to IT?
Well, I was CFO of the Tebe Investment Group for a number of years, and one of the investments that Tebe had was Vodacom. And through being involved in the board of Vodacom, obviously then got to be known. I was recruited into Vodacom. So that was really my first exposure or stint working in a operational ICT environment. And then leaving Vodacom, I joined T-Systems in middle of 2016 as CFO as well. So T-Systems is proper IT. It's not, whereas Vodacom is more of a telco than it is IT. So I really enjoy the industry. I think that for me, the key thing about the IT industry is that it can have impact. How you use technology, how you use technology to reach people, to enable people to do what they need to do, can have quite a massive impact from a country perspective. So I think technology, or at least this industry, is key to the future of the company, or well, of the country rather. So I really enjoy it. I think no day is the same as any. Every day comes with its own challenges, surprises, things that you need to think about, come up with solutions. So it's agile and it's interesting all the way.
Now, looking back over your IT career, can you maybe share highlights, a memorable moment that made you feel proud and that you made a difference?
Yeah. So I think maybe I can share two moments. The one that I think I'm particularly proud about is how we as an organization give young people opportunities in the company, because we run an internship program, and so these young graduates come in and be able to start work. So a lot of them, when they come in versus the time that they leave ready for the world of work outside of T-Systems. They are confident. Some of them don't leave. You see them growing as individuals, studying further, growing in their careers, starting families. So you just see the development of a whole person and the trajectory of a career that I think from a country perspective is important. And I think also it's not just about, for me, I always say to the company that it's not about working only for T-Systems. It's about empowering yourself as an individual to be able to be relevant in the country, not just in T-Systems. So I think that's what I really like about that. Of course, we have challenging times when customers' systems go down and, you have to deal with a upset customer. So that's also, call it interesting, and you obviously have to solve the problem when it arises. So that's why I say every day is different. Every day is a challenge, but it's a challenge that I enjoy.
And can you tell us who inspired you, especially in your early days?
Well, my grandmother and my mother, really, my sisters as well. I think the one thing, as I said, I grew up with my grandmother. The one thing about her was that she was strong but quiet. She was quite grounded as an individual. She was very principled. You always knew where you stood, kind of thing. Everything was just clear, and yet very gentle. So I appreciated that about her, and I appreciated that both her and my mother always made sure that I read. I started going to the library, City of Johannesburg Library. Before I was even 12, I was going to the library on Saturdays, like reading books and reading and reading and reading. So I liked that even when I came home from school, they would say to me, don't focus on housework, just do your schoolwork. So they really pushed me to get an education, even though they were not educated. So I think they inspired me to work hard, to be the best that I can be, because I saw them being hard workers.
Do you still read a lot today?
I read. I read still today, not as much as I want to, but I still read, yes.
And looking back over your career, Dineo, would you say there was a major turning point where your career could have gone a different way, but you decided to take it this way?
I think the turning point would have been for me when I started training as a CA, when I did the articles, because if you think about it, I could have, and at that time I was a teenage mother, because I had my son when I was 18. My son is 23 today. So if you think about it, I could have simply just, did my BCom and got into mainstream of work and life sort of carried on. But because I chose to do this training, as difficult as it was, being a young mother, studying part-time, working, obviously these things are not easy to deal with. And then my second son was born 3 years later. And so I was a mother, I was a wife. Studying, all these things are not complex to deal with, are not easy to deal with. So I think the turning point for me is that I made the right decision to go into training as a CA, as opposed to simply going the easy route.
Right.
Yeah.
And what would you say is driving you today?
I think personally, I'm one person who's quite eager to see women being able to have options and financial freedom. And I think it's important because we know that girls, wherever you go in the world, it's not as though girls have same footing as boys, openness and open doors. So I think that is important for me personally, that I even as I lead this organization, be conscious and remain conscious of what opportunities are we giving to young women, to women to further their opportunities and their careers. And also because we are seeing that a growing number of households is led by single women. So and we still have the problem of pay differentiation between men and women. So it's really, really important for me to see women progressing, do well, and grow in their careers, be able to take their children to school, be able to, in our community, we have something called black tax, being able to deal with that as well, because it's a reality, we deal with it. Being able to handle that as well, because where I come from, it's not, whatever I do is not just about me. There are a number of people behind me who are looking up to me, depending on me, needing me to assist. So wherever I am, it's never just about me. So, and I think this applies to many other women. So women development is very important to me. And I think what is driving me, let's say from a company perspective right now, with the kind of challenges that the company has had, it's quite important to me that we, as a company, we learn from the past mistakes that we made and make sure that I, as a new leader coming in, our systems and our way of doing work is set up in a way that the company is not vulnerable to making errors in a way that compromises the integrity of the company. So it's important for me to ensure that as someone who is fresh coming in and charting a whole new future, everyone is on the same page about what are the values of the organization, what are the ethics of the organization, and what drives us as individuals. And that's why I think it's important that as a leader, as any individual, we need to be very clear about what are our value systems, what are our principles, what is it that we will or will not do, will or will not entertain. Because you cannot separate that from how you lead. You simply can't.
Now, Dineo, I know it's a big question, but what does the future of leadership mean to you?
I think two key things for me. One is leading with the future in mind. I think one thing that we can say as a country was in dialect was leaders who led the country with the future in mind. And I think when you have leadership that is looking at today and the benefits of today and what happens today, you cannot expect anything other than a mess. And I think that's where we are as a country. That's what got us here. So I think it's super important that we lead with the future in mind. As I said, I'm a mother of two. I need to be thinking about when my sons have children, what will this country be looking like? How will they look at me as a grandmother? How will they look at me? What example am I setting for them? So I think it's really, really important that we lead with the future in mind. That's super important because there's generations and generations and generations. I mean, Jesus is not coming tomorrow, So we need to be mindful of that. And then secondly, I think in education is important. I think our country, our continent, and as a people, if we don't sort out education and give children education that makes sense and that prepares them for the world, because we can see that we can't simply operate in South Africa. We have to be able to operate beyond South Africa. We have to be able to compete in Europe, Asia, America. And so it's important that we give our children chances and opportunities that enable them to compete. But most importantly, to break the poverty cycle. I mean, there is just still too much of poverty and too much of children who have no choices, who are in an environment that they are born into that is just almost a prison kind of thing. Because what can they do? The environment that they find themselves in is that. And so I think it's important that education is really prioritized.
And Dineo, what have you learned from your own journey that you consider most important for building future leaders?
I think for me it's really being very clear about who I am, what my principles and my values are, what I stand for, what I will be part of and what I will not be part of. I think that every day I show up at work, I show up as Dineo who knows who she is, what she stands for, what her values are. And whatever decisions I make, in whatever way I lead, it is guided by that core and that center of who I am. And so if something does not agree with the center and the core of who I am, I can't do it. So that's, yeah.
Now, when you speak to aspiring leaders, what is it you tell them, and maybe even your children, what is it you tell them they should focus on for building a future-proof career?
well, hard work is still center, right? And I think it's interesting because our children and our millennials, I mean, I see it even with my sons, because even my younger son, that there is a little bit of that thinking of, can I shortcut something over here? So it's always have to step in. No, actually, you need to do the work. So I think work is important. Hard work is important. And I think also just the appreciation of process. In the world that we live in today, where everything has to be fast and instant, one can skip process. And when you skip process, you skip learning, you skip experience, you skip a developing and a developable mind and mindset. Because you simply don't have the in-between. You skip the ability to gain insights, understanding, and ability to discern a situation. So I think process is important. I think our young kids should not be afraid to go through the process. Because life is a process anyway,
Now, talking about technology, Dineo, what would you say are the technologies or maybe the tools of technology that future leaders should study and learn?
I think that in terms of how we do work today and the fact that we need to be able to work, call it, across regions of the world, across continents and across locations, even working from home, as some mothers would be working from home. I think it's important that from a leadership and a company perspective, we have technologies that do enable that collaboration, do enable a situation where people can work from anywhere, that connectivity that is required for people to be able to be anywhere, everywhere, and yet the data that we work with is still secure and reliable, and we can exchange data. So I think connectivity is quite important. I also do think that data analytics is very important. I think that there is so much of data in the world, from the way we behave in terms of how we relate, in terms of social media, to the way we shop online or otherwise, to the way we do business. So it's important for leaders to quite clearly understand what technological tools do they have in order to optimize how they use their data. What does it mean for their business? How do we make business decisions with this data that we have? And the only way you can do that is to be able to have good analytical skills over that data. So for me, those are the two things that are important. Obviously, underlying all of this is the need for security. I think we've had examples, even in our country, of where security has gone wrong from a cybersecurity perspective. So I think underlying all of this and underpinning it is very, very strong security platforms.
Now, Dineo, you touched on social media. How would you advise future leaders to go about social media and building their personal brand using social media?
I think social media can be good and it can be not good as well, depending on how you use it. I think as a leader, it's important to be conscious about what is the image that one is creating using social media. Because the reality is that the minute you're a leader, it stops being about you. You lose some rights to privacy, you lose some rights to your own self, because you represent something. So I think it's important that leaders be conscious about how does the social media profile that you create, the social media feeds that you put out, whatever posts that you're doing, what do they communicate really? What is the objective and why are you doing that? What message are you trying to get out? What is the objective? And what does it say about you as an individual and as a leader? So I think we need to be conscious about what our social media positioning represents, and is it what we want it to represent?
Now, as a mentor to future leaders, Dineo, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored somebody and that person took your advice to heart?
So in my days with the Teva Investment Corporation, one of the things that I really used to drive with the team is that the guys in the finance department, I always say to them, please make sure you study so that you can eventually become a CA. I literally went all the way to making them apply for articles, and I knew they would have to leave the company, but I was okay with it as long as for me, it was like, why don't you push yourself all the way? Don't not try, So one of the ladies there, I remember she wanted to stop her studying. She felt that she was also a young mother. She felt that it's just too much, studying, working, children, being a wife, this is all too much. So I really discouraged her from discontinuing her studies. She carried on. She qualified as a chartered accountant 2 years ago. So I think it's something that is a proud moment, because she could have given up. Like I said earlier, that I could have given up. So she qualified as a chartered accountant. The other one that I worked with, I told her, okay, apply at this firm, that firm, and the other. She applied at one of the firms. She completed her articles. I came across her earlier this year. She's completed her articles. So I think that's a good story.
And Dineo, are there any role models of leadership that you would suggest future leaders should study and maybe learn from?
I think that, I've shared my personal role models as well. I think that from a leadership perspective, I admire someone like Nelson Mandela, obviously. And I think the late Nelson Mandela, what I admired about him mostly was he did not come across as someone who took glory to himself. He came across to me as somebody who, two things. First, was super concerned about the future of the country, where the country is going, the health and the well-being of children. And secondly, he gave credit to his colleagues, to his party members. It wasn't all about him. So I think that's admirable because he had the platform to take the glory, but he didn't take it. He shared it. So I think that's admirable. And to me, what it says is that as leaders, we can benefit from taking others along and not hoarding power. Because I think when we hoard power, that's when we begin to make decisions that are only about us and what we stand to gain from it. So I think that's an exemplary leader. I look up to people who have been through very difficult life circumstances and overcome them in order to achieve their goals. I particularly like the late Maya Angelou, and I like her because she wrote her soul, So I like that about her because she also overcame challenges that I also went through in my own life and still achieved who she was. She still got to who the person was and was able to pour her soul out in spite of all of that.
Now, Dineo, how can our listeners get hold of you and where should they follow you?
So on LinkedIn, I am on LinkedIn, so my contact details are on there.
Right.
And of course through my company as well, I can be contacted.
And last but not least, Dineo, is there one piece of advice that you would really like to convey to future leaders that they should implement in their own lives?
I think be very clear about who you are. Be very clear about what you stand for. Be very clear about what impact you want to leave in the world. When you have lived life and have gone, because we all die, what is it that will be said about you? It's very important to be clear about that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom and reminding us that life is a process and not a shortcut.
Thank you.